Well, the idea of today is a quick presentation and overview about DeFi primitives, and to exemplify a primitive with the most basic, simple primitive, which is the automated market maker. And by understanding it, maybe like to provide insight into what other things can be built and what DeFi is about, and all of the hype around it and all of the possibilities. We're going to talk a lot about this in the context of XRP Ledger, because the idea is to understand like how you can leverage XRP Ledger, but also to understand like what are the other possibilities beyond the XRP Ledger itself. So it's not going to be in depth, but feel free to ask questions. I'm going to be trying to focus on ideas that are easy to generalize, but I also will be trying to provide a little bit of insights into the functionalities of these automated market makers that are one of the most important features that power DeFi. So last session we talked about XRP Ledger and how it works. Essentially, the idea of XRP Ledger is being a blockchain that has native functionalities that a community of users agree on using by a mechanism capable of adding or even modifying the blockchain itself. So it allows the chain to evolve and to add new things as people experiment in these and other blockchains. And one of these things that have been since the very beginning, it's the decentralized exchange that allows people to trade and swap one form of currency for another form of currency or the native token XRP. But other functionalities have been added afterwards, like the native functionality to mint or to exchange non-fungible tokens. Other things that are features can be thought as ways to create assets like fungible tokens and other functionalities like escrows. DeFi is one of the most active areas in the blockchain space. So one of the features that is right now has already been developed specifically to be added and integrated into the XRP Ledger is the automated market maker, the one that we're going to be talking about. But it's not going to be for sure the last one. So money markets that we're going to be briefly talking about is also one of the things that are in discussions, and it's probably going to be available in the future, depending on the community of users and validator nodes, which are the ones responsible to vote for these amendments. So they need to agree, at least 80% of them, to approve a new feature to be integrated. Other things that people are working on are decentralized identity. That's also an amendment that has been proposed, and the ability to connect through a bridge the XRP Ledger by enabling the transfer of tokens. A little bit of terminology that it's important for this matter. XRPL is the name of the chain, the XRP Ledger. EVM means Ethereum virtual machine, and essentially it's what allows smart contracts to run on a blockchain like Ethereum. Automated market maker is a type of decentralized exchange that we're going to be talking about. Liquidity provider, LP, are the kind of like the role in these automated market makers are going to be providing the liquidity. We'll talk more about that. DEX means centralized exchange. SEX means centralized exchange. DeFi It's decentralized finance, and central limit order book is a traditional decentralized exchange. Sorry, it's a traditional way to trade tokens like the ones that we're familiar with, for example, Binance. We're going to be talking more about this and the different approaches, because these can be on-chain, but it can be also be off-chain as well. So just maybe you already know what central limit order books are, but the idea is that users can be buyers or sellers, and they are allowed to submit orders to buy or to sell a certain asset at a certain price. And in a way, they create like a two-way auction, because you can like put whatever price you want, and only if there are other takers willing to pay the price, then that price will be executed, and those prices will be visible. This is what forms the order book, and depending on how many of those orders, then we can say that there's liquidity that can, and the liquidity depth has to do with how much of that liquidity exists. So it looks like this. It's intimidating for non-traders, but it's a very simple mechanism, and you can see why it's like a two-way auction system, because you can essentially put like any price in the form of an auction, and people will take the price depending on how it moves, either to a higher price or to a lower price, and that's how price discovery gets formed. This is the most liquid way of exchanges, because it's just very efficient, and also it's easy to build bots that are the ones maybe posting those orders. So it's a mechanism that can easily be automated. So you can see, for example, low liquidity means that there isn't a lot of, so the amount is really low. So even though you have a bunch of different prices, in reality, there's not a lot of capital. So if someone takes like this price, essentially will eat all of that liquidity, and that is, it's kind of like a low depth. And high liquidity means that you have more of that amount, so you really need more tokens in order for or currency in order for you to be able to eat all of those sitting orders. So that's the main concept. And the brilliant thing about blockchains is that you can put that mechanism on chain, meaning that these type of mechanisms typically live on a computer that is run by a company. So think of Binance or Coinbase. Essentially, they don't use a blockchain at all. So they have their own servers, and when you deposit, for example, Bitcoin, yeah, they do have a wallet that it's a concentrated wallet for all of the funds, and once that they receive it, they can read that new balance on the corresponding blockchain, but they will just go to their systems and they will like just print a number, and that's the one that you will see in the order books. That will allow for efficiency, so you can easily trade. But in reality, you're not using a blockchain when you're using a centralized exchange like Coinbase or Binance. The other approach is the idea of the same way that blockchain becomes like this clearinghouse for payments, where it's in no one's control, but the control is actually shared among the participants of this network, especially like the infrastructure providers or nodes. So the idea is to add more functionality to that on-chain list of features, so that you can support something more complicated or complex, like the ability to submit those orders. So that's the idea of a decentralized exchange, to leverage a blockchain to program the functionality of an exchange, but on chain, making every operation has to be validated by the nodes of this chain. So what it allows is anyone can trade with another peer without intermediaries. There is no central authority that operates like in the example of Coinbase. And the most important thing is that there's no custodian. So you don't need to deposit your funds and someone can run away with your money. So you are in control because you have, I mean, your private key will never leave your system. So that's the most compelling part. And why do we need it? Because essentially, like, we have examples like FTX, which is what it happens is that when someone can run away with funds and use those funds in another thing that it's not authorized by the user, they typically at a certain point in time they will go and do it. So the idea is for those type of events to not occur, and also we want a system that it's capable of privacy preservation, because in a way you don't need to give all of your personal information to every single company that runs an exchange. So that in a way it's also one of the motivations for decentralized exchanges. And at the end of the day, those features make this type of platforms to be more accessible, because they tend to be international without any borders. Typically an exchange, there's a lot of regulations that they need to comply with, precisely because there's a lot of risks associated with them. So they don't operate sometimes internationally. So some of these exchanges may not be operational in the United States, but like that can affect like region by region. So the whole idea of being a decentralized exchange on top of a blockchain is compelling. However, one of the most important realizations of the blockchain community is that sometimes it's not the most efficient way to run a full central limit order book on chain, because it takes time not only to create orders, but also to cancel those orders. So if you put an order to sell a specific token for a price, and then price changes because other trades were executed, then you will lose time and there will be latency, because you need to cancel the orders that are maybe like not going to be taken now, and you want to create new orders, but that latency creates a lot of inefficiencies. So that's how AMMs came to life, and that's how they emerged from those inefficiencies that made central limit order books a little bit impractical. So the AMM, it's the idea, it serves the same purpose, the idea of just being able to trade one asset for another, but with a simple tweak, which is that the price will be determined by an algorithm rather than just by the people submitting the orders. And it's a mechanism that requires a few type of roles, which is like there will people putting like those tokens that are to be swapped or traded. There is like a price determination algorithm, and sometimes there are like incentives. Well, there's the ability to swap the tokens once that those assets are provided by liquidity providers. And there is also sometimes on top of that incentive mechanisms for people to either trade or provide liquidity. And that it's like typically non-sustainable incentives that the creators of these platforms sometimes set aside as a way for people to join and bootstrap the initial liquidity and get the mechanism going. The key components of the AMMs is definitely like the creation of liquidity pools, which essentially is just funds that are locked in a smart contract that are the ones that the users, which is a different role, will be utilizing just to trade and to do other things in the case of money markets. And there is also the slippage, which is the difference between the expected price that you're expected to trade for, and like the final price that you end up paying. So the way to visualize something like this is that represents like a smart contract that concentrates the two tokens that are provided by these liquidity providers on the right. So they initially put a certain amount of token A and token B, and that will determine the price of that initial allocation of funds. And then there will also be, after they deposit those funds, the algorithm will calculate the price, again, based on that initial ratio. And every time a user will trade token A for token B or token B for token A, so that the price will be moving, right, along a curve that I'll be talking more about, but they will also be providing a fee. And that fee that is paid by the user, it's the incentive as well for the liquidity providers that are going to be the ones that they submit capital to these pools, but in exchange of that, they will get a transaction fee that the user will be paying. So that's the mechanism. It's extremely simple, but it created a lot of efficiencies, and that's how it works at a high level. So you can see how it looks from the user perspective. Essentially, for example, a pool of XRP BTC. That means that some liquidity providers put both XRP and BTC so that people can trade. And in this case, there's a trading fee, and that trading fee will be collected by the liquidity providers, LPs. And essentially, the only problem that they may have is that if the price changes in these tokens, they may be able, because of the volatility, may be able to lose money at the end of the day, and that's what it's called, the impermanent loss, and that's the type of risk that liquidity providers are exposed to. So the impermanent loss. Yeah.
If I may, is it possible in our project to eliminate the transaction fee, or is it something in the blockchain that can be changed?
Yeah. So now it's configurable. I'll talk more about it, about like different designs, but like in principle, it's something that it's one of the configurable things, depending on the type of asset and things like that. And I think the idea will be that there's a free market for that. About yield farming, I already mentioned what it is, but here you can see it's a practice of staking or lending crypto assets to generate high returns or rewards in the form of additional cryptocurrency. So this is basically from the user perspective. So users will come and they will either trade or they will like deposit money to these pools to generate typically rewards that come from either issuers of a certain token or the providers of the AMMs. And smart contract, maybe it's obvious, but it's just a program that it will execute and according to the rules or the policies that are part of those contracts, like it's just lines of code that the validators essentially will be responsible for running and making sure that it complies with those terms. So talking about where these AMMs were born, essentially like a brief history. The history, it's Ethereum. It's a great blockchain for prototyping and experimentation because of solidity. Essentially allows you to write these type of functionalities in a way that it's easy as using JavaScript. So people, that's how they started to create different experiments back in the days. 2017 Bancor was the first platform that was experimented with something like this, but it was until 2018 when Uniswap was created, and in a way the reason why it exploded, it's because it made something that so far was very much a complex thing. They turned it into a very simple mechanism for swapping the assets, especially from the user perspective. And ever since, there has been a lot of innovation in this space because of precisely the adoption. But overall, the biggest innovation, in my opinion, is just how simple it is. The AMMs in this environment, like the EVM ecosystem, they typically require someone writing a smart contract, so someone can take the code of Uniswap and then deploy it again, and then you will have a replica of the AMM. And obviously the challenges in some of these networks like Ethereum, it's there are high fees, but there are other good things, which is like this is widely used blockchain with a lot of assets being issued in such blockchains. So it creates also a lot of incentives for people to come, even if prices are high. And also one of the positive things is that people are using this as primitives, meaning that they maybe are thinking about an application where trading is just a small part. So instead of like doing or making a replica of this AMM, the idea is more to leverage the existing functionality that is provided by the existing and liquid AMMs, because AMMs, in a way, they have network effects. The more liquidity, the more LPs, the more funds that are put by these liquidity providers, then it will offer better experience for the traders, less slippage in the price, and more ability to trade tokens, and that creates a network effect, more users, then more liquidity providers. These are, like, in general, some examples of AMMs that have become famous for one reason or the other. But in general, like as Balancer or Uniswap, the important thing is that it's very simple, right? So instead of like that experience of the central limit order book like this, so you have something like really simple. So it's really democratized the usage of a decentralized exchange, which people were thinking at the time a decentralized exchange was going to look like this. But in general, the one that got really good traction was more like a simpler thing, leveraging like what the blockchain is good for, but understanding the limitations and especially latency. So just to explain a little bit, like in general the price and this algorithm that I mentioned works, is the idea behind how is possible that this is so simple. It's because the price will respond to just a curve, meaning that like you can see here, this Y and X represents the amount of tokens, token A and token B, that are put in a certain pool. And if someone trades token A for token Y, or the other way around, so the price will move along the line, right? And these different curves are us because like there are certain AMMs that require like different curves. For example, that's why Curve created one for stable coins. But in the vanilla Uniswap, you can see the dotted curve essentially represents how the price moves as more traders come and start swapping, meaning exchanging one token for the other. They will move the price, and in a way there will be arbitrageurs which will be doing arbitrage with other exchanges. Think of maybe centralized exchanges, or maybe they're looking at the price outside of a blockchain, and they will be the ones swapping tokens here. So the formula is very simple. So the idea is that there will be a constant when you multiply this is the amount of token X and the amount of token Y, and if there's less of this, so essentially like the other will move because this will remain constant. So this is determined by the initial allocation of X and Y, and that's how, by maintaining this multiplication constant, you'll be able to obtain like the result of the price moving alongside the curve. The difference between first generation and second generation AMMs is, for example, in the case of Uniswap version 2, which is one of the early versions, is that the liquidity will be all provided like in a big chunk, but in Uniswap version 3, there are like segments of the curve where people will be providing liquidity for. So that allows the majority of capital essentially will be concentrated where people are trading. That's how people will be providing more liquidity there. And so as you go in the curve, you will see less capital, and in a way that creates capital efficiency. In the case of Uniswap B2, think of this like the price that you will never see. It also has some capital stock or locked in those portions of the curve, meaning that you have a bunch of capital that is sitting there and it's not being used. So that's the idea behind the Uniswap B3. This is just an animation where you can see how it looks in reality. So this is, for example, Ape, one token that was associated to this collection of Bored Ape. And this is in 2022, how it moved against the wrap ETH token. And this is like in principle the result of the AMM V3 that allowed the kind of like the majority of the liquidity to be concentrated at the near to the price where it was executed the last trade. In the case of XRPL, one of the interesting things is that the AMM it's going to be one AMM for the entire chain. So I said, like on Ethereum, you have replicas of and there's like segregated liquidity. The idea behind XRPL, as for other features as well, is to have the efficiencies by creating a feature and then making it available to anyone in the network, and that also creates a very lean like model for people to not have to deploy new contracts, but the idea will be to just leverage these advantages. So it's native because it becomes part of part of the protocol itself. There's one innovation that I will not go in detail, but the idea is to, I mentioned that there's an impermanent loss because sometimes price moves in the direction that the liquidity provider will essentially lose money just because the price moved in the direction that made them lose money. So XRPL tries to innovate on that front, trying to create an auction system and bring another role which essentially will mitigate that risk. And the central limit order book integration is one of the important things. Instead of like two different types of exchanges, because XRPL is very fast, so not a lot of the trade-offs that we see on Ethereum are present or visible. So one of the things that it's important is to realize that there's a combination of the central limit order book with the AMM, and so they will interact in the same system, meaning that if an order comes, it will, depending on the liquidity, go through any of the two routes, the central limit order book or the AMM. And anyone will be able to participate as liquidity provider. So it starts with the formula of Uniswap V2, K equals X times Y. And it essentially, it's designed in this way so that we can see liquidity for the long tail of assets, meaning like if there are like tokens that are not super liquid, like currencies like dollars or pesos that tend to be more liquid, there are tokens that not a lot of people are trading. So the idea is to provide liquidity for this type of assets that normally are not well served in the normal DEX. And the idea is for token holders to be able to earn yield, essentially by providing liquidity and collecting the fee that we mentioned. So we're trying to innovate on the front of making people not to be exposed in the risk of impermanent loss. Also, there's protocol level governance, so people can essentially like you know, in the same way that the community governs the addition of new features. I mean, the AMM leverages that same mechanism, and the integration with the central limit order book, it's also a big part of this. And one of the things that it's true not only for this, but in general, it's that the XRPL has very low fees. It has very fast transactions. So a lot of things that other blockchains are not capable of doing, like combining a central limit order book with an AMM, it's possible on XRP Ledger. All liquidity is aggregated at the chain level, and people will not be worrying about the gas that they will need to pay to execute one of these swaps or trades. The idea is, again, to see that this is a mechanism that has different roles, like the LPs that we talked about, liquidity providers. They just want to maximize returns and to have less impermanent loss. The arbitrageurs are the ones that will be taking advantage of the auction mechanism. And then there will be the traders that they will just want to exchange token A for token B and have as low slippage as possible. So these are like essentially the transactions that are added to the ledger in order for the mechanism to operate. Bid, create, delete, deposit, withdraw, and vote. So these are not a lot of things that need to be added in order to enable all that functionality that in a way unlocks a lot of the potential for these new type of tokens to have liquidity, for example. This is one. I mean, to wrap up, like this is the I want to show like this is Orchestra Finance interface that will be one of the first projects that have been working a lot on the interface to kind of like give users exposure to all of these features that have been added and that allow you to essentially either create new pools and add funds, or simply just swap tokens by leveraging that existing liquidity. And with that, I'm gonna end the presentation, and I'm gonna open up for questions. So here I see a question from Nestor. Can we use the AMM in testnet? Yes, it is available. There are not only one interface, not only Orchestra Finance, but there are other projects that are I think Moai Finance, it's another project that it's essentially providing an interface to trade all of these features.